Hey everybody, welcome back to 5 and 5. Today's topic is going to be on user authentication, and we've got the fantastic Barry Gleason with us, who's product management in Kemp. Welcome, Barry.
Thank you, Dee.
Off, if you could tell me, what is the main problem with application authentication today?
Okay, so I think the main problem is for organizations to figure out how to make applications available to their users the way they expect and the way they want, but at the same time without exposing application servers to potential risk, without compromising application security, um, and without reducing the user experience, without putting too much passwords and logins constantly for the users. And balancing these is really tricky because if you think about the last few years, um, the way business applications has changed so much. So remote working has become really popular, obviously.
Exactly.
On top of that, then you have the devices people are using. So, people are using their mobiles, they're using tablets and so on. So VPNs isn't enough. A VPN mightn't be so good on a mobile app. And then on top of that, you have a massive growth in SaaS applications. And a lot of businesses, they have a hybrid. They might have some applications they host themselves, they might have some SaaS. And this makes it really tricky.
So with all of these different elements contributing to that pain point for customers today, is there a path to solve that?
Yeah, I think the first step is just to analyze it and analyze what applications your organization has, and then your user access patterns and how people want to be able to access them. There's definitely no size fits all for this. And I think like some of the ways to address those problems, like first of all, if you think of one of the issues I highlighted, which is protecting your actual servers. A lot of these application servers, they might not have been designed to be exposed directly on the internet. So the first thing that should be considered is some kind of edge pre-authentication. That would basically mean that when users are trying to access this from the internet, we only pass those requests to the server if they're valid. So, on Kemp Loadmaster, we have pre-authentication, and it means your application servers, they don't get bombarded with all these requests that maybe from parties that aren't allowed access them and so on. In terms of like managing the actual security, then you need to think about things like the factors of authentication. If you just have password access, that mightn't be enough if you're allowing people use whatever device to access them. So then you need to consider things like two-factor. So that could be maybe where they need a password, but also a one-time password from a key, or maybe via SMS. People might be familiar with that with banks and so on. And the last one then to consider will be, how do I integrate, as I mentioned, the SaaS apps? Is there a way to have single sign-on across all your applications on site, and maybe even pulling in your SaaS apps that people don't have to be constantly logging in?
And I suppose a lot of people are very familiar with two-factor authentication and some of the aspects around it. But what are the different ways that you can actually enhance application authentication today?
Yeah, so like as I mentioned, I think single sign-on is a really big one. Ensuring that, as I said, a user, while their access is very, very controlled and it's exact, it's secure and so on, but they don't have to be constantly doing it. So on Loadmaster, we have the concept of an SSO domain. So what you can do is you can specify your applications that are part of that domain. When a user logs in successfully, they can access all those applications without having to constantly log in. And then, as I mentioned, when you want to integrate maybe with your SaaS applications, that could involve maybe an identity provider in the cloud. So a lot of people are using things like Azure AD, Okta, and other providers, and then being able to on Loadmaster, using SAML as an example, what we can do is we can bring the legacy or maybe the applications you have hosted in your own network into that domain. So people don't even know if they're accessing an app on site or in the cloud and so on.
Very clever. And I suppose that leads us really into some of the cool things that Kemp is really doing to make user authentication much easier, much more secure. What's coming down the line in respect from Kemp's side in user authentication?
Yeah, so like currently, Kemp Loadmaster supports a number of protocols. So LDAP, you have Radius, we support client certificates, we've SAML, Kerberos, I could go on. And what that really translates to is massive integration capability. So it means we don't have just a specific, we support this domain controller or we support this IDP. And that really gives you the flexibility to be able to, create that solution that fits your environment and your network. On top of that, then on Loadmaster, you can do things like we have support for CAPTCHA as an example. So what that is if you're presenting a web form for a user to log in to do this pre-authentication, you can enforce CAPTCHA. So what that does is it prevents any bot attacks from getting into your network, for example. On top of that, we offer the ability to customize this web form. So what a lot of users can do is or customers can do is they can use a customized form where the user doesn't know that they're even hitting an edge device. It just looks like the end application because it just looks the same. They log in. So that makes it quite seamless. On top of that, we're looking to support OAuth on top of SAML. And what that will allow us to do is integrate with these, do what's called identity federation, which is basically this idea that you can have a identity provider, a single provider that can be shared across your cloud apps, your SaaS, and your on-site apps.
Super. So huge amount going on there, loads of different options for customers depending on what the application is, where it's being hosted, their security needs and requirements. If somebody wanted to find out a little bit more, where would they go?
Yeah, so the best thing to do would be to go to kemp.ix, deploy a free virtual trial Loadmaster. And from that, when you can set up what we call a virtual service, and you can configure your edge security. You can configure whatever authentication mechanisms you want. I'd also add, like when testing this stuff, there's many domain controllers and identity providers that can be trialed really easily. You can download a month trial for domain controllers. There's free domain controllers. On top of that, even some of the cloud identity providers, a lot of them offer like a 5 or 10 user free account.
Thank you so much for today's 5 and 5, Barry. Hope everybody liked it. Please subscribe and leave us some comments. Thank you.